we are all set.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this public forum information session where the Hampstead School Board will be presenting a proposed plan for our SAU transition from a multi-district SAU to a single district SAU. Before we begin, I need to read our remote meeting statement. As chair of the Hampstead School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen to this meeting by dialing the following phone number: 888-475-4499 or 877-853-5257. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom telephonetically. Instructions have also been provided on the district website at hampsteadschools.net. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please email hmstechnology@hampsteadschools.net. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Melissa, will you please take roll call attendance?
Megan Malcolm.
Here, and I'm alone in this house.
Caitlin Parnell.
Here, I'm alone in the room. There are other family members in the house.
David Smith.
I'm here alone in the room with others in the house.
Jim Sweeney.
Here, alone in the room, others in the house.
Karen Yusenka.
Alone in my office, there are others in the house.
And Executive Consultant, Dr. Earl Metzler.
I'm present in my office, and I have other members in the house.
Thank you. And I also see Interim Superintendent, Dr. Brian Cochran. I'd like to include him on the roll call.
All right. I'm at work in my office, and there was no one else in the building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. So just as a short introduction, the purpose of this meeting is to put forward a plan for public feedback that the Hampstead School Board has been working on to determine what our single district SAU is going to look like as of July 1st, 2021. I want to give a quick outline of what we're going to be going over. The focus tonight is to look at what the organizational structure that we're proposing and considering will be. We'll be looking at number of employees with a little bit of background about how we reached that number. We'll be looking at the types of positions that we are looking at. And additionally, we'll be looking at some preliminary budget numbers. And I want to be clear about the budget numbers. We're still working on those. Okay, so there's a lot of different factors that are going to land us at a final number of what our SAU budget will be. Although it will no longer be a separate budget from the Hampstead School District, which is what our current setup is. It will now be just under the umbrella of the Hampstead School District. But we do want to look at what that impact is going to be, as well as how that can be offset from what our current setup is. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so tonight we're talking about the Hampstead School District SAU Transition Plan. I'm not going to go through this line by line, just so everyone knows. We've had a lot of long meetings lately, and I think we can hit highlights here. But I will be asking that our admins put this up on the website within the next day so that we can have this available to everyone to take their time and look at. It's not super lengthy, but it does, you know, give you some information. So basically, why we're doing this, I think everyone knows, but I'll do a quick overview. The Timberlane School District, who is our sister district in SAU 55, has voted to withdraw. We've been preparing over the last several months for what Hampstead looks like on its own. And since, if you're not in this every day or a couple times a week like board members are, I wanted to quickly kind of just talk about what the SAU, excuse me, what the SAU services are. Generally, we're talking about educational programming and delivery, operations, finance, human resources, and in addition, transportation. So we do feel that Hampstead can support these needs on its own, but we wanted to look at how we could potentially consolidate positions or really look at what the right size staffing would be for a district the size of Hampstead for our educational needs and for our town needs. So we looked at what we currently have, and then we looked at what we think we're going to need. So currently, SAU 55 has somewhere between 13 and 15 employees. Clearly, a district the size of Hampstead doesn't need something of that size. If you want to on your own look through this list of what we currently have, you can do so. I'm going to focus more on what Hampstead's doing. So the board looked at Hampstead's needs. We looked at academic and district leadership. We looked at finance, human resources, and any related support we need in those areas. We did look at and are proposing consolidating some positions in order to have some budgetary savings, as well as, again, I'm going to keep saying, be right-sized for our district and our town. So a couple things we did talk to our current admins. We looked at how things function at SAU 55 now. And in addition, we reached out to other towns that are similar size to us. It's actually kind of hard to find a town or a district that is exactly matched with Hampstead, mostly because we are smaller to mid-sized districts and because our high schoolers go to Pinkerton. So we don't have a high school in town that we're supporting on our own. But we did reach out and had discussions with Barrington. David Smith took the lead there to speak with both the superintendent in Barrington, whose name I'm pulling up right now because I want to give credit. So Dan Moulis is the superintendent in Barrington, and then Mr. Smith also spoke with Dave Gibson, who's the SAU chair there. So he was able to bring back to the board what has worked for Barrington, what hasn't. But again, we looked at a few different districts. Barrington kind of matches up as closely as possible in terms of size. And then additionally, they also send their high school students out of district. So we looked there, and after looking at what our needs are and what similar districts have done, we are looking at proposing staffing for 5 positions. We're looking at superintendent, a combined position that will be responsible for business administration, chief financial officer, and human resources officer all together. Additionally, we're looking at a chief executive assistant to the superintendent, who likely will also be providing support in human resources and even potentially other places as well. But additionally, we're going to have looking to have a payroll and human resources administrator and an accounts payable administrator. So we're going to go into this a little bit more, but those are essentially the 5 positions that we are looking at. here's just to kind of give you a visual of what this organizational chart will look like. We have the school board. Oh, excuse me, before I go into this, any position that is denoted with an asterisk, that's essentially a new Hampstead position. So what you're going to see in this organizational chart, we're not talking about adding every position that you see on this chart. The ones with the asterisks are essentially the SAU staff for the district. So we have the school board, of course, and then the superintendent. The superintendent has the chief executive assistant, who also will be doing work with the district administrative assistant staff. Again, if you look further down under the superintendent, we have our current executive director of 21st Century Learning, Curriculum Assessment and Technology. Again, that's a place where about a year ago, a little bit more, we looked to consolidate some positions for efficiency. And then on the same level, we have the business administrator, chief financial and HR officer. Under the executive director, we have the principals, the director of special education, and then as you continue down, the network administrators and the technology administrative assistants. Under the level of the business administrator, chief financial and HR officers, we have the director of facilities. We have two of the new roles that we're talking about, the payroll and human resources administrator and the accounts payable administrator. And then also falling under the business administrator role will be the food services manager. So again, those are the positions we're talking about. And the next piece that was very important was where we are going to house our new SAU staff. For anyone who doesn't know, the current building that SAU 55 is in belongs to Timberlane, and as well as a bigger space than we need. We don't need the space that is there anyways. So we looked at this basically two ways. We looked at what it would look like to have the SAU offices on campus in one of our schools, and then we also looked at what it would be to have them off campus, but somewhere locally in Hampstead. So this is an important piece because we want everyone to have their space to do work. We want them to all have an optimal environment for that. So ultimately, we are proposing locating our SAU staff off campus. And there are several reasons for this. As many people know, we have severe space limitations at both schools. At this point, there is not room to add offices. We just don't have the space without taking away from student services, which we're just not going to do. Additionally, really we looked at the only place that even potentially could be used was an area of the middle school, but even that we were looking at an estimate of $60,000 or more, which that cost would include hiring someone to design an area. We would need a separate entrance for this type of office, both for safety and for confidentiality when you have people coming in and out of the SAU offices. So in addition to just really just not having space to do it. So we also felt that there likely could be disruption to the school environment, to the learning environment, if we had SAU functions within the school. And you want school-related things to happen within the school. You don't want confusion about who's supposed to be doing what. If the superintendent's in this building, does he or she have to be involved in anything that normally they wouldn't be if they weren't in the same building? So ultimately, we decided that we would propose an off-campus location, and we did look into what the availability of office space is in Hampstead. And while Hampstead doesn't have a plethora of office space, there actually are some very good opportunities and locations within the town, and it does seem to be that there is availability. So we, again, wanted this to be a central location. We wanted it to have ADA compliance. We would need a first floor entrance or elevator access. and we just wanted to be able to have the right setup for us. We're budgeting at this point that we could probably lease the space that would be needed for about $1,300 a month, and then an additional $250 per month for utilities. So that's our location proposal. Next piece, and I'm sure many people are interested in this, is what the projected budgetary implications are. I do want to stress that this is an estimate. We're still working on this because there's just a lot to look at, but we're comfortable at this point thinking we're going to be somewhere close to this range. So for the 2020-2021 school year, Hampstead contributes $537,182 to the SAU 55 budget. So what we're looking at is that salaries and benefits for 5 additional people will be somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000. Facilities and utilities, again, somewhere between $18,000 and $20,000. So we're looking at total additional expenses of somewhere between $618,000 to $720,000. Again, these numbers are going to flux. We're going to have to work out what exactly they are, but this is our starting point. And of course, that's a big number. We also have to consider that right now we're already paying $537,000. Which is less than the number there. But when you add in a couple of other pieces where where we're looking to have cost savings and efficiency savings, we're showing the reduction of the technology director. We've already merged that with the curriculum to go into our 21st century learning piece. We're also proposing to reduce the assistant director of special education. We're still looking at that, but where we feel that a superintendent could take on some of those pieces, and a little bit, in just a few minutes in this document, I'll show you kind of where we are, what type of responsibilities we're proposing for each of these 5 positions. We have other reductions in associated benefits. So by the way, that salaries and benefits line for expenses, we're talking about not just salaries, but obviously benefits including retirement. We're talking about FICA. We're talking about health insurance. So if you add those up, you can see this, that we potentially have actually some savings of $819,000. Again, all of these are going to be worked on. We're trying to give you the closest numbers we can at this point. So looking at savings, looking at what costs are going to be, we do think this balances out. We could have savings of $100,000. We could have savings of up to $200,000. Or we could be closer to that kind of even number of what we're currently paying for SAU services. So again, these are not the final numbers, but we're doing our best to get you some numbers to be considering and looking at. So this timeline here, I'm not going to go through everything. It's kind of to show you that we have been working on this. There are other things behind the scenes that I'm not going to go through in depth tonight, but there are things to be done that we're going to start working on. As far as the policy committee, we'll start looking at what currently is in the SAU 55 policies and what needs to be converted to Hampstead policies. We're going to be transitioning emails and other accounts over to the Hampstead School District technology. Excuse me. Somewhere around January is where we'll be looking to be finalizing leases for office space, because we don't want to wait until January 1st, 2021 for that. We need to have things in place beforehand to have transition starting to happen. Again, there's some Department of Education pieces in here, looking for furniture, all of the things you need to do when you're moving. So again, as of July 1st, 2021, Hampstead becomes its single district SAU, and we go from there. We do have some final pieces that will be settled up with Timberlane after July 1st, looking at final financial audits and any distribution of assets that'll happen after that. Excuse me. So again, these are the proposed job descriptions of the 5 positions that we're proposing. I'm not going to go through this line by line. Basically, but I'll hit some high points. Our superintendent is obviously the chief executive officer. That person's going to be working closely with the school board. They're going to be working with Pinkerton for our high school students. They're going to be overseeing our school communities. They're going to be working on finance and budget with the chief financial officer / business administrator / HR person. They're going to be working on budgets. As I mentioned before, with the special education piece, we feel that in a district this size, the superintendent will be able to handle some special education pieces. Specifically, we could be looking at them being the contact and the organizer for our high school students, because even though Hampstead students go to Pinkerton for special education, our district is still involved in that. Overseeing internal practices for student services and procedures, etc. Next, we have the business administrator / chief executive and human resources officer. That person has a lot of responsibilities. Again, we consolidated this for efficiency and also for cost savings. Obviously, it's going to take the right person to be able to handle this, but we feel confident that we can find the right person and bring them on board. So they're going to be in charge of accounting and finance, obviously working on human resources, heavily involved in budget development, overseeing purchasing, overseeing payroll and accounts payable, and working with our facilities director for any operations in our buildings that we need. And additionally, this is the person that will be responsible for transportation and food service. Next is our chief executive assistant to the superintendent. This person needs to have their hands in everything to some extent. I think we all know that executive assistants really help run things. So they're going to be providing administrative support. They're going to be working on planning for board meetings and working with the board to get ready there. They are going to look at tuitioning. They're going to be interfacing with district council on legal measures, working on agreements, contracts, onboarding, renomination, the employee information system. They're in charge of employee files, employee changes, benefits changing, managing events and planning, et cetera, et cetera. Next, we have the payroll / HR administrator. So this person is going to be responsible for payroll, working under the BA, CFO, HR officer. So I think most people know what payroll does, but there's a lot more than just payroll, as you'll see in the list here. They'll also be working within HR to set up enrollments, to review insurance and benefits, implementing training, managing the retiree insurance, creating salary reports, et cetera, again. And then the 5th role that we're proposing is the accounts payable administrator. This person is providing accounting support. They're maintaining records. They're, again, they're working with the CFO / BA / HR. We need a shorter title for that. They're assisting employees and vendors in looking at district policy. They are in charge of invoices and purchase orders to get those settled. They're corresponding with vendors with questions. They are mailing checks, filing paid invoices, maintaining contact with the district treasurer, uploading voucher information, maintaining databases for the utility costs, et cetera, again. So I think what's clear here is we have tried to consolidate, and we have tried to, we're going to be expecting a lot of the people that are in these positions, but I believe that we'll be able to find the right people to do it. That is the kind of formally prepared piece. Again, we're going to make sure that this gets up on the website so everyone can take their time and look at it. As I mentioned when we were planning for this informational session, we have an email address specifically for feedback, on this SAU organizational plan. So I'm going to give this out a couple of times, but the email address is saufeedback@hampsteadschools.net. saufeedback@hampsteadschools.net. And we'll mention that again. But one thing I do want to make sure that people are aware of as they're giving feedback here, this is the first step. We have to have an organizational structure in place before we move forward with anything else. You'll notice, especially, and I'm going to speak to this because it's been out there and it's been discussed and everything else. We're not talking about specific people yet. We have to know what our organizational structure looks like before we look at who is going to be considered for those positions. So I know there's a lot of opinion one way or another about who should be where. If you are going to send us that feedback, we're not going to address it in the question and answer session next week. We will absolutely answer any questions. We will read comments that have to do with the organizational structure that we've presented tonight. So that is our first step. We have to get this in place before we can move on to the next step. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from being involved. I'm just being clear about the feedback we're looking for now. And I will commit to anyone who sends an email and gives us feedback or asks a question, we will address them at the answer portion of our public forum on the 26th at 7 o'clock. So we're going to be ready for that. That's kind of everything that I had for this piece. I do want to give our other board members a chance. If I have forgotten anything, because it is likely I have, I may have skipped over something, please feel free to speak up. I'm going to give you that time now. Okay. If I'm hearing nothing, I'm just going to say I did a good job and I covered it all, and we're going to move ahead. Okay. So again, for everyone who is attending, we are going to get this presentation up on the website so that we can give you a chance to look through it in more detail. I wanted to hit the high points. I wanted to hit as much as I could without boring everyone to tears. But so once you have reviewed it, and once you have had a chance to kind of formulate your thoughts and feedback or questions for anything we didn't cover, or if you have questions about how we got to this proposal, you're going to email SAU feedback@hampsteadschools.net. Those emails to that email address are going to go to every board member so that we can then, we're going to be getting together, gathering an hour before the forum, the second part of the forum next week, so that we can be ready to answer the questions and get organized for that. we do need to have a cutoff for questions coming in, for emails coming in. I am going to propose, and I believe we talked about this in the last meeting, but I know we had to switch dates up. So we're talking about the question and answer portion being on the 26th at 7 p.m. I am going to propose a cutoff of the 25th at noon for emails coming in to get answered for that next meeting. Is that okay with everyone else?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
It works.
Okay, so for anyone who's watching, now or later, you have until noon on the 25th to get your comments and questions into us so that then we can address them on the 26th at 7 p.m. And I think that's about it for this information session. Again, unless anybody has anything else they want to put forward for this. But seeing nothing. We do now have scheduled a workshop